Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears here. Thank you for joining me. In today's video, I'll be making a fall cornucopia card using this fall cornucopia die set from Pretty Pink Posh. This is part of their brand new fall release. It's a pretty large die set. There's so many dies included in this set. So I went ahead and did some die cutting, and I'm starting out here with the actual basket piece, and I die cut that out of some brown cardstock, and I'm going to do a lot of ink blending today. So I'm just inking up the edges of my die cuts because I think that it just adds a lot more depth to your die cuts. So here I have a brown ink that I inked up the edges of the brown cardstock, and I'm just taking a Q-tip to get into the lines that are on this die cut image, just to add some more depth on all of those lines. I know it's hard to see on camera, but those are all stitching lines that are included on that die. Now, if you have a mini ink blending brush, you can use that as well. It might work better than a Q-tip, but I didn't have one on hand, so I'm just using a Q-tip to get the ink on there. So as I work with the die cuts, I will lay the die that I use down on the table so you can see what the die is that I die cut out. So for this one, it's this circular die. This circular piece I die cut out of the same color brown cardstock. And this is going to go on the front round part of the basket that I had on the screen previously. So this piece also has some stitching lines. It has lots of little stitching lines, and I love all of these lines because it just adds so much more detail to these dies. And I am just adding that brown ink all over the front of that circular piece to outline those stitching lines, and now I'm going to go ahead and glue that to the top of the basket. So in addition to the basket, that large basket, there are several other dies. There's the pumpkin that you see me inking here. There's also some corn, there's grapes, there's a squash, there's also some fall leaves. So we'll get to all of those in just a minute, but there's so many dies that you can put the die cuts in the basket for a really nice fall card. So here I die cut the pumpkin out of some orange cardstock, and I'm just inking it up with some orange ink. Also included on this die is the stem for the pumpkin, and I die cut that out of some brown cardstock, and I will go ahead and add that to the pumpkin. So the next die is the squash, and I die cut that out of some yellow cardstock. Here I'm inking it up with some yellow ink. And I wasn't crazy about the yellow ink on the squash, so I decided to add a little bit of brown. It's a very light brown ink that I'm using here. And then this squash die also has the stem, so I die cut that out of some green cardstock, and I'll ink that up as well, and then I'll go ahead and glue the stem onto the squash. The next die is a cornstalk, and it is a very large die. So the top of the die has the corn, which when die cut, it is a separate piece, and then you have all of the leaves. So underneath that, there's a separate leaf, and then there is a trio of leaves, which is a separate piece too. So when that die is die cut, you end up with 3 different pieces of cardstock. So I actually die cut 4 pieces of corn, and then I have the leaves. Okay, so I have yellow cardstock here and green cardstock. So I'm going to take out my inks and add the green ink to the green cardstock and the brown ink to the yellow cardstock. So I'm adding a little bit of that brown to the corn. I just like the way that that looks better than adding yellow ink to it. So next I'm going to use my scissors, and I'm going to cut apart these leaves so that I have 4 individual leaves, and then I'm going to add the corn to each one. So I'm just going to put glue on the back of the leaves and then add the corn inside. And I'll do that for all 4 of them. Next, I'm going to work on the grapes. So I die cut the grapes out of some purple cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and ink that up. This die has lots of stitched lines around each individual grape, and I'm going to go ahead and use my Q-tip just to add some more ink around all of those circles. I'm also going to add some ink to the stem, and I'll go ahead and attach the stem and then these little brown squiggly things. I don't even know what those are called, but I'll go ahead and attach those to the back of the grapes. This die is for the pear, so I die cut that out of green cardstock, adding some green ink. And then I also have a die there for the leaf and the stem, and I'll add ink to those, and I will attach those to the pear. So I'll go ahead and glue on the brown stem, and then I'll glue on the green leaf. So this set of dies is a mushroom, and there's also a sunflower. You can cut them apart if you wanted to, but I just figured I'd leave them together. It's just easier to handle that way. So I die cut the sunflower out of yellow cardstock. There's also a center, which I die cut out of brown cardstock. And those two pieces go together. And then the mushroom also has two pieces. So the full mushroom I die cut out of brown, and then there's a layering piece that has dots on it. I die cut out of red, and that layering piece just glues right on to the solid mushroom. So you can make your mushroom any color you want. So there's those two pieces. So the next die is the wheat, and I die cut the stem out of green cardstock, and then there's a separate solid die for the part that looks like a leaf, and you can make it any color that you want, and then just add that leaf piece right onto the stem. So this is just going to cover up that green cardstock, and I have 5 of those. There's also a fall leaf die included. I die cut 3 of those out of some very light pink cardstock, and I'm adding some red ink to the edges. So all of my die cutting is finished, so I set those aside, and now I'm going to work on the background of my card, and I'm using a stencil from Pretty Pink Posh called Layered Foliage, and this stencil is a 2-layer stencil. This first layer is the leaves. You can color them in all one color or different colors, it's up to you. I am using my Driftwood ink from scrapbook.com, which is a very light brown. And I'm going to ink up all of those leaves onto my cardstock. And my cardstock is cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, so it'll be a little bit shorter than an A2 size card panel, because I'm going to layer this onto a solid piece of brown cardstock. So that brown that I layer it onto will bring out some of the brown that's in the ink color here that I chose. So I wanted to go with something very subtle. I didn't want it to be too busy. I didn't want to color each leaf a different color or anything like that, because the main star of this card is the cornucopia with all of the fruits and vegetables, so I didn't want anything too busy in the background. So I was going with something very subtle, and now that I finished the first layer, I added the second layer of my stencil, and this layer has all of the stems. So I'm using the same color ink. However, I'm using a little bit of a heavier hand, so more pressure when I add the ink, and a little bit more ink here just to make it darker. So that's one way of, if you don't have 2 different color inks, you can always use the same ink but do lighter pressure or more pressure to get a couple of different colors out of that same ink pad. So here, after I stencil up all of my leaves, I'm just going to add a little bit of that ink around the edges just to tie in all of those colors. For my sentiment, I'm going to use the Sentiment Strips Fall Stamp Set, and this stamp set has so many different sentiments on it related to fall or Thanksgiving, autumn, and there are matching dies that you can use to cut these out. So these dies were released last month, and they correspond to these sentiment strips. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp out my sentiment I chose the sentiment that says thankful, grateful, and blessed. And I'm just stamping it out with some black ink onto some white cardstock, and then I'm going to use one of the sentiment strip dies to die cut that sentiment out. Now I'm going to put my card together. So I have my background and then all of my die cuts, and it's just a matter of putting them in different spots on this card until you get the scene that you're looking for. So obviously that large basket here is going to go in the middle, and I'm just going to layer up all of the fruits and vegetables around it and inside of that basket to create a nice design. Once I have everything in place, I'll go ahead and start gluing them down. So I am starting out with any of the die cuts that are in back, so meaning they're flush against the cardstock panel, and those are the 3 yellow fall leaves. I am marking a spot where the basket is at the top so that I know exactly where I want to put it back onto the card panel. Once I have that glued down, I'll go ahead and add all of my other pieces back to the basket. I did take a picture with my phone of the card, how I had it laid out, so that's how I know where everything needs to go, because I liked the way that I had it when I had laid it out initially, and I'm just referring to my phone. My phone is there off camera just to put everything back the way that I initially had it. So I'll go ahead and glue all of these pieces to my card panel. And once everything's glued down, I will add this panel to a piece of brown cardstock. The brown cardstock is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And then I'll add that to the A2 size card base. And an A2 size card base, it does also measure 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So that's going to complete my card for today. If you're interested in any of the supplies that I used today, please check the description box of this YouTube video or on my blog at lisamearsdesigns.com. And I always appreciate when you use my links because it does help support me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.